The expansion of Heathrow and the construction of a new northwestern runway means we have to review the way aircraft arrive and depart from the airport. Heathrow's flight paths have barely changed since the 1960s. But building a new northwestern runway gives us the opportunity to completely redesign our airspace. Also, as part of UK-wide airspace modernisation, we have to use more modern satellite-based navigation systems called performance-based navigation, which concentrate flight paths and make sure that aircraft follow defined routes more closely. The first thing we need to do is to set out a clear set of rules or priorities. These are known as our design principles, which will guide our redesign of Heathrow's airspace. In this consultation, we want your feedback on 6 key principles. There is a choice to be made with each, so it's important you carefully review them. There are 3 options we could apply when choosing where to put flight paths in relation to where they are today. For example, we could minimise the total number of people overflown, with a more concentrated route over as few people as possible. This reduces the total number of people overflown, but could result in routes over areas that don't currently have any flights. Or we could minimise the number of people newly overflown, which would result in a concentration of aircraft over the areas already overflown today, and may not minimise the total number of people overflown. Or we could share a number of concentrated routes over a wider area. With this option, for example, we could use 2 routes or more at any one time, so that traffic is spread across a wider area. Or we could use one of the routes for a time, then turn it off and use the next, and the next. This would mean that a larger number of people would be overflown, but less frequently. We can also prioritise flying over either urban or rural areas where possible, but there are important considerations to take into account. Urban areas are more populated than rural areas. To reduce the total number of people overflown, we could position a route over rural, less densely populated areas. However, urban areas generally have a higher level of background noise, and so aircraft might be less noticeable here. We also need to recognise that rural locations are often valued for their peace and quiet. So with this principle, we could route aircraft over urban areas, recognising that they have higher levels of background noise and might be less noticeable to some people. Or we could go over rural areas where fewer people live. Urban areas often have parks and open spaces within them, which many people value for their peace and quiet. For this principle, we could avoid the open spaces by putting routes over more populated areas where it's possible to do so. Or we could reduce the number of people overflown and put routes over the open spaces, avoiding the more populated areas. Avoiding populated areas could mean flying around them. Flying in a straight line towards your destination is fuel efficient, but this could mean flying over more populated areas. If we were to attempt to design flight paths around populated areas, we could fly over fewer people, but we would burn more fuel and aircraft would produce more emissions. The redesign of our airspace is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to modernise the way our airspace is used, and so it has to be as future-proof as possible. We are therefore proposing that our new airspace is designed around the latest navigation technology. This means that older aircraft may have to be upgraded by airlines in order to fly the new routes. Only a small number of flights are allowed to operate in the night period. We could apply the same principles at night as we do in the day, or we could apply principles differently during the early morning and late evening. For example, using Principle 3, we could fly over open spaces at night where possible, recognising that these are less frequently used at this time. It's important that you have your say and tell us what you think of the principles that we could use to redesign our airspace. As you can see, there are choices to be made, but with your help, we can redesign our airspace to ensure it's fit for the future.